Well, thank you all for coming. Looks like this is going to be a popular event. I want to start out with a little announcement first. We got the Historical Society got a very nice card and a very nice donation from Mary and Jeff Hale. Their dog Pepper won the Best of Show and People's Choice Award last year. Unfortunately, they lost the dog this year, but they honor the Historical Society, so we're very pleased for that, and thank you. Okay. Now, we always do a show and tell, and since this is a nautical adventure, you probably saw the sign outside featuring the Vendovi trip. You can sign up for a sail time. It goes out of Young's Park, and this is Saturday, September 7th. And so there's times you can sign up. Trip is $90. That includes the ride out, a little bit of history tour, a walk around Vendovi, and a picnic lunch by Girardelli. So if you feel like you can do that, please sign up, and we'll be in contact with details on that. Now, for further nautical experience, our show and tell. Many of you have probably seen this, recognize it from the hall. It's upside down. Well, if you're in the water, it doesn't matter. You need any direction you can have it. So anyway, we found this. As you may know, we do now have a container, storage container for a lot of our artifacts, and we're just beginning to just put stuff in there. So I was in there today looking for something to show. I thought, well, this would be nice. We have a nautical theme. And I came across this. And this, when procured, and this is off the Guemes ferry that we're running now, correct?
That's right.
And then on the back, he had the principal crew sign it. So it's something for our archives. So this is something that I've never seen before, so it's kind of cool to have that.
It'd be nice to clean that up, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be nice to clean that up. I don't know who's responsible for that. I'm going to store it.
Well, I can assure you that it was pretty dirty when we did it.
Well, that means it hasn't been in the water, so we're okay then. So
Do we have one from the original Guemes?
we do not.
Oh,
Okay, with that,
What we do have from the original Guemes is the banner that flew on its maiden voyage.
Oh.
And it's like 12 feet long.
Oh, you said no? Sure.
Yeah, I'm positive. I want to make sure we get Win in the spot.
in the spotlight. Okay. Without further ado, Win Anderson and Smuggler Kelly.
Well, welcome. This is a surprising turnout, actually, to come and see a show on a convicted felon who was popular enough to have an entire point on Guemes named after him. Lawrence Kelly, he was actually in business here for pretty close to 47 years. Can you hear me back there? All right. And we can research his property holdings, newspaper articles describing his struggles with the law, and we have details of his best-known boat and some of his techniques. But for a man who lived and worked here that long, we have darn little personal information. There's no diary, there are no letters, and there was no extensive personal interview while he was active. Just imagine the changes he saw from the days of the Civil War, where he served, to the dawn of aviation and automobile age. Seattle was a tiny little village in 1864 when he arrived. There was no anacortes, and Guemes wouldn't get homesteaders for another year. I'm just beginning to tell Kelly's story. There's plenty of work to be done, so if there are any volunteers, I'll give you the file. In recent days, the emphasis on smuggling has turned, not recent days, recent years, has turned due south, away from Canada, has taken on a whole new reputation. Kelly's work now seems rather quaint. The art of Kelly's style separated the perpetrator from other forms of lawbreaking. No one is hurt. Transactions are mutually acceptable. He's a middle broker, buying at a reasonable price, selling at a huge profit, covering considerable uninsured risk. One observer at the time said the smuggler is regarded in many quarters with good-natured tolerance. In many minds, smuggling is a species of lawbreaking over which the Ten Commandments have no jurisdiction. One prominent description of the local industry comes to us from James McCurdy, an author of a book called Crisscross Over the Boundary that was published in 1910. Censure them as we may and should, we cannot help but thrill of admiration as we read of the courage and determination of these men who, choosing the darkest, stormiest nights, have brave the sullen waters in their miniature vessels when none other craft of their tonnage is found abroad. McCurdy admired Kelly and appears to have crowned him king of the smugglers. Summarizing the truth and fable that placed Kelly in the pantheon of Northwest smugglers, he wrote, "In his prime, he was the most persistent and successful smuggler that ever operated single-handed in these waters." Photo number 1 is up. That's Kelly. It says recent picture. I think that's probably from about 1910. He wasn't called the king based on volume or value of his imported booty. He was a piker compared to the big boys. In their late 19th century steamboats, hidden among legal cargo, they were doing far more illicit business in single trips, delivering more Chinese workers, silk, wool, whiskey, and refined opium in bulk than Kelly could dream of. Custom and Border Patrol agents also got into the action, much to Kelly's dismay. Where there's money to be made, official corruption is not far behind. It was simply unfair competition, especially since they had the power of arrest and confiscation. Kelly was considered an honorable, nonviolent smuggler who gave up peacefully when apprehended, and only attempted one futile escape. In the end, his chosen profession cost him hefty fines, some time in prison, a loss of his family and property over the latter half of his 47 active years. From what I've read, what made the king stand out in the public's view, and maybe why he was acceptable as having his name placed on the point, is that it was his good-natured audacity, operating alone with no more than a suit of sails and some oars, and his unique knowledge of the sometimes treacherous waters. The record shows he ran at least 3 different vessels, the unnamed Red Hull, 1 or more Whitehall boats, and the famous Katie Thomas, photo number 2. I know.
Oh, that's the way home.
These were one of the most refined row sailboats of the 19th century, ranging from 14 up to 25 feet long. They're valued to this day for their many perfected attributes: speed, maneuverability, shallow draft, lightweight, load capacity, and simple beauty. This could have been a utility vessel for Kelly's entire career. We really don't know what boats he owned and what became of them, except for one. But the boat for which he is best remembered is the Katie Thomas, partly because it remained supporting his legend, deteriorating on display at Ship Harbor for many years after Kelly retired and left the area. And we have more data on the Katie than we have of its owner. Ironically, he probably just owned it for a few years in the twilight of his career. Photo 3. This is a half model of a Pinky. The carving represents one version. The miniature half models in the 19th century were designed to display attributes requested by a buyer for different fisheries or locations. Well known in the San Juans, Katie was built in 1894 on Fishery Point, Waldron Island. The builders were Ashton Thomas, San Juan County Sheriff, and his brothers Ellery and John. The Katie was a Pinky type. She was 8 gross tons, 38 feet long, with 12 feet of beam, and was named after Ashton's wife, Catherine, who sewed the sails on her foot-powered treadle machine. The boat was used, in fact, everything was foot or hand-powered on Waldron Island, and still is in many cases. The boat was used in the Waldron fishery and is noted as a fast sailor. Katie was sold after the Alaska Gold Rush of 1897 and passed through several ownerships, including Kelly. As much as we like to think of Katie as the Kelly's mothership during his extensive career, the calendar proves otherwise. We don't know when he took possession, but it was likely after the turn of the century, and he was out of business by 1910. The good news is that we can find out. The Coast Guard keeps records of all documented vessels. Katie's number is 161054. I talked to the documentation office, and the bad news turns out to be that an abstract of history costs $50. That was beyond my budget. Number 4. This is a rare image of Katie Thomas flying with several possible rigs. Her shape, ballast, and sail carrying gave her an advantage in hard weather. Number 5. These are the lines and offsets from which any good boat builder can build a boat. And these were taken off Katie's hulk by the late Guemes shipwright, Kenny Powell, as she lay on the bank at Ship Harbor boat graveyard in the 1970s. 6. And that's, if you can see it, that's a sail plan that Kenny drew for it. 7. After years of ruthless labor, driven hard and put away wet, as they say, Katie is seen here at rest at Cap Sandy Marina, September 2, 1955, in a photo by reporter Farmer Dirks of the American Bulletin. A newspaper I'd never heard of before I took this. Note. Let's see, is that number 6?
7.
7.
Okay. Number 8. Persistent Dirks found possibly the last owner, Hans Wold, a World War II veteran. He actually lived on another boat in the marina, and Dirks urged him to pose with Katie's wheel. Now, I've got to try to research that and see if we can find if that still exists somewhere. This is the last known photograph or image of the vessel in the water. And I noted that the headline writer described Kelly as a smuggler. No, I'm sorry, not as a smuggler. What did I- That's a different headline, I'm sorry. Go back.
I don't know whether I can, but we'll try. That's the
Pirate.
one. That's the one.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't a pirate. And I've lost my notes. Number 9. Years later, Katie's remains were delivered to a cradle on land as seen in this Kurt Hansen photo of 1974. Demolition took place in 1979. And guess who showed up? You remember Bill Mitchell? Somehow, through his untiring dedication to historic preservation and pure cussedness when hot on a case of a notorious rogue, muralist Bill Mitchell managed to arrange transport for a couple of 100-pound sections of the hull planking, which he added to his collection, which went in his yard in the rain. That's where I accepted this piece, number 10.
Oh, good.
And that's outside, out of the rain now. I accepted it in 1985 for the Guemes Island Historical Society. Anything wrong with that statement?
The year, there was none.
We started the society in 2002. So this one waited around.
Well, he knew you needed it.
The planking tells its own story. Cedar originals, probably some of these, which were below the water line, are now 123 years old. Later replacements, these here, and you can see it's cheap wood, poorly installed. Number 12. But the real story is seen in this telling view. This shows the sad signs of desperation by some perplexed boat builder to try to work inside cramped quarters to give Katie a few more months or days, or patch her well enough just to get out of the marina to avoid a moorage penalty. But there is a lot of information in both sides of this, and some of these frames are original, oak, bent, probably steam bent oak, and some are new, and there's even a little piece of plywood stuck up in here. It's pretty sad, but that's the end of the boat. Photo, graphs 12, excuse me. Photo 13. This is some of Bill Mitchell's collection. He unfortunately didn't donate them, but he said that these were probably used for personal use for opium. And the best place to find them was around the sites of the now gone Chinese barracks at Ship Harbor. And now for the biography that you've all been waiting for. Kelly was born in 1839, either Ireland or England. He arrived in New Orleans on the eve of the Civil War and enlisted with the Confederate Army Louisiana Tigers. His military career needs to be researched, but after discharge, Kelly sailed to Puget Sound about 1964 aboard the ship Young America.
Not 64.
Departing New Orleans, he vowed, quote, "never to earn an honest dollar under the stars and stripes." From that goal, he rarely veered. His business spanned, like I said, nearly 47 years. Note, Charlie Gant, one of his articles, made mention that Kelly was planning to build a barge for the legal lumber hauling trade. It's unknown if that ever happened. Kelly married Native American Lizzie Coots in 1877. She was the daughter of Charles Coots, a sheriff for Whatcom and Skagit County in 68 to 72. Lizzie and Larry produced 9 children, mostly girls. And the first home was on Guemes Island property that he owned from 1872 to 78 at the southwest point that bears his name. He and Lizzie later moved to Sinclair Island, where Kelly served for a time as a school board member. In retirement, he contacted the Louisiana chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy, who lined him up with a soldier's home. He died in 1926 at the age of 87. Photo 14. Arriving in this wild, lightly populated area, Kelly made note of the voids and weaknesses in border policing. He soon entered his chosen profession, an enlightened decision considering the wide open nature of the Pacific Northwest at that time. Back east, the government was just struggling to close down after the cleanup after the Civil War. As far as we can tell, the law did not seriously interrupt Kelly's business for 22 years, when the government finally found some resources to tighten up the border. I love this Mitchell kinetic mural where entangling vines seem to be growing up the agent's body with some mystical purpose in mind. It also illustrates the plodding, tubby look and reputation of early customs vessels. In 1886, Kelly was nabbed with 40 cases of Canadian whiskey. He must have been in shock. He just wasn't used to being caught. But his usual trickery wouldn't work in this case. Many times he'd been intercepted by inspectors, but usually evaded arrest. One scheme was to anchor his cargo to a float for later pickup. Another was to place his opium in a weighted sack, tinned opium floats, and toss it with a rope attached to a ring boat below the waterline. It worked until the late 19th century when one clever inspector keel-hauled the boat, discovering the hidden hoard, 567 tins of opium, which would have been a fortune. The result of that whiskey misstep that I started this paragraph with, as far as we know, was Kelly's first trip to McNeil Island Federal Penitentiary. It wasn't long before technology was changing everything. Kelly saw the arrival of railroads as an opportunity. Now, his wife Lizzie was also involved in his work. On one occasion, she and a friend were tasked to carry goods by train south. They were admonished to keep an eye on the luggage. But at a stopover in Seattle, the attractions of the big city were just too tempting. They went shopping, leaving their heavy burdens on board, and on their return they were nabbed. I've lost the source of this undated anecdote and follow-up details, but I've never found any report of Lizzie being taken into custody. Kelly's next brush, after the '86 arrest, was with the law was 1904, and it nearly killed him. Also on a southbound train, he was spotted, and 60 pounds of his usual contraband was taken into custody, and he was arrested and put on a northbound train to Sumas for indictment. But he broke free, and he leaped off the train at full speed, maybe 25 miles an hour. His captors picked him up, unconscious, but no broken bones. A cash bond of $750 changed hands, and he was back in business. The next year, 1905, he was nicked again, this time working a small sloop near Vashon Island. Officials expressed surprise that Kelly risked arrest for nearly 60 pounds, but he said he bought all he could afford. He was sentenced to 2 more years. On his release with good behavior, he declared he was getting too old for the business and would mend his ways. But by 1910, he was in jail in Seattle, this time based on a pathetic 15-pound bust.
Of opium?
Yeah. It was still opium. He smuggled many things, though. But the Canadians in Victoria had plants that refined the opium until, I'll get to that. By this time, federal law forbade importation of all opium. Canada helped remove the scourge by closing down factories at Victoria, partly at the request of the Chinese government. It had the effect of boosting the street value to as much as $400 a pound. But Kelly was truly out of the illicit picture to take advantage, regardless of possible profits. Note, Lawrence Kelly has been confused in some sources with a colorfully named Jim Pig Iron Kelly, a more notorious smuggler. Our guy was alleged to have drowned smuggled Chinese workers when fleeing the law in panic. The rumors may have been transferred from Pig Iron or just made up. I think it fails the reality test. Imagine the logistics of a single helmsman maintaining control over a boatload of valuable human cargo. R.M. Becker, Fidalgo Island pioneer, prominent, and Lawrence Kelly acquaintance, vehemently denied that Kelly would ever done such a thing. A kinder-hearted man never lived. Kelly was believed to drop documented passengers at remote locations for later retrieval, if under pressure by authorities. There is a known incident witnessed at Square Harbor where a friendly visitor was treated to an unforgettable scene. When Kelly at anchor welcomed the man aboard and shouted out to the world, "All clear, John!" And around the bay, brush began to rustle and the heads of several immigrants began popping up. The story went a long way toward cementing Kelly's reputable humanity. He was known to deal honestly with neighbors and associates, such as William Monks. Monks had the store over on March's Point, which actually was the first store in this area. the time. And he was almost a hoarder. He kept almost all of his business records, and they're still in the possession of the family. I just talked to Don Monks, former commissioner, last week, and he is kind of operating his place as a museum until the materials from that store go to the Anacortes Museum. But among the paperwork includes a note scribbled on a scrap of paper asking Monks to continue providing credit to Lizzie in Kelly's planned absence. He was known to keep his word. I think that much of the time Kelly was more honest with officials and judges than he really needed to be. Just my opinion. Number 15. This little building has been described, and I think it's in one of the books, as Smuggler Kelly's hideout on Kelly's Point. Number 16. The Shriver family descendants indicate this may be true or not. Notation on the reverse side is what here I'll read to you. This is the first house built by Saul Shriver on Guemes. It stands today on my mother and father's farm, and this is framed in memory of our 18th wedding anniversary, dated August 19th, 1932. And the names Bernice and Gerald, I think, and Deanna, with no last names. So we got some description, but not enough information, and that we can research. But we have one 1895 property map of Guemes, and a large Shriver, spelled a little bit differently, parcel appears at Kelly's Point. It was still occupied as a smaller parcel in 1917. Thank you, Tom Deach, for digging up that map, and others. We don't yet know the year built or whether the cabin would have existed during Kelly's career. But we'll clear that up. Now, number 17, we're getting somewhat off the track, but I'll tie the threads together at the end here. Number 17. This picture is widely circulated. There is a guy gave a copy to the store, and they keep it up. And it's just an amazing shot for all the things that it shows about 1877 on Guemes Island. The wharf, right there, believed to be the first built on Fidalgo or Guemes, dates to 1877, and Postal Service documents confirm that date. And the postmastership wouldn't have been granted unless they had a dock. It was constructed with the most abundant natural island resources, stuff that was just in the way, field stones and fir trees. Obviously no pile driver was available yet. It is the site of the first working post office, and that was in the first building there, and store on Fidalgo. And just as a note, Anacortes didn't get postal service for another 13 years. Notably, 1872 to 78 is the period Lawrence Kelly owned his property on Kelly's Point. He had a boat, there was a place to dock, he could purchase lumber, fruit, perhaps limited produce from Flora Mangan's garden, and other limited goods from the new, quote, store, unquote, which is not shown in this picture because it was actually built a little later. he could use the mailboat service and maybe some manpower. I feel he would have shopped locally. But I'm just speculating. He dealt extensively at the established Monk store on Marsh Point, and no doubt in LaConner and in Edison.
But when that picture's on Guemes,
That's right.
right, I thought you said Fidalgo.
Oh, I might have.
Probably not.
It was
It might be.
No, I said first
Doc.
dock
Okay.
on Fidalgo or Guaymas.
Oh, I gotcha.
Okay. Now, it's kind of hard to see what's blown up, but there's a number of people in this picture. I think there's one right there. There's 3 in front of the house, 3 more on this side, 2 in front here, and 1 there. And 1 more. Can anybody see the last one? It's too hard, I know. You need binoculars. Right over here. Black hoodie. Prow of a Samish canoe loaded. Earliest known image of a Native American canoe on Guaymas. Now, let's look at the construction again. Notice the angle of the upright supports. One is plumb, another angled, one is plumb, the other is angled. Let's go to photo 18. This 20-foot fir log is nicely hand-worked into a mortise and tenon base for long-gone angled uprights fastened with wooden tree nails. No metal nails, no metal. It is the only recognizable wooden artifact that we have from the era. It's 98% buried in the mid-tine range, preserved in clay, gravel, and brackish water. It is surrounded by scattered fieldstone debris from the original wharf. Willie McWaters, manager of the general store, discovered it just last year. That's Willie. Picture. He's my hero now. It could be as old as 142 years, and probably is, but it may have been part of a later rebuild. We know it's not recent. The wharf photo shows where Kelly may have tied up. This image defines the exact location. The store would have been up the hill just directly north.
How did he find it?
Well, I'm going to tell you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Because I'm a little bit embarrassed.
Oh.
In 42 years that Elaine has lived, and I have lived here, I've walked that beach between the store and our house hundreds of times. I take credit for recognizing the fieldstone, which looks like a jetty at a certain tide height, as the site of the wharf and thus the big store that once loomed to the north. Then along came curious Willie asking about the site. He soon and he went down and he spotted a suspicious bit of log, kind of not poking out, but just angling out, and it had, the bark was removed. So it had been in that position for a long time.
It would be this section right here.
Yeah, that's it. And otherwise, the bark is pretty much intact, which is amazing to me. He spotted a suspicious looking log among the scattered stones. He gave me a call, but I was skeptical. 142 years ago? It had to be eaten up by torpedoes, but a bit of excavation revealed the woodworking. Bingo. That's our baby. Finally, number 19, and This is a personal tribute to Kenny Powell for painstakingly recording the lines and offsets of the Katy for the benefit of historical study or for anyone who might want to build a replica. Kenny, who died in 1991 at the age of 37, is shown here with his then wife, Penny Sorrell Powell Hewitt. He decided not to build a replica of the Katy, but built a beautiful sister, which that's the stern of, to another 40-foot schooner called the Sinbad. Kenny named his the Tillicum. And that concludes the story.
Where they found that log? What part of the beach? You said it was between
It's,
the store and your house?
East of the ferry dock, about 100 yards.
Oh, yeah?
Is it still there?
Yep.
How is it being preserved?
Same way it has
Water.
It just reburied itself.
Yeah.
In the beginning of your talk, you said you got married and had 9 children, is that what you said?
Yeah.
And that was like 120 years ago or so, like great-great-grand, are there any great-great-grandchildren Kellys running around here?
There are, and actually Bill Mitchell interviewed one of the women that has done some research, but her research was dominated by trying to find Kelly's daughters, which all their names were changed, and she just spent a lot of time getting there and didn't really go into Kelly's history at all. So I haven't talked to her. Yes?
When there's back in the early 60s, we always heard that there was a pirate Kelly hangout or storage shed over near Lervick Road, just up the street from One Bubble's place. Any truth to that? Do we know if that was one of his places?
No, I've heard that too. In fact, some people associated the little cabin that I showed you with Lervick, but obviously
It was much.
the
What we saw back then was much coarser.
yeah, well, obviously the family placed the cabin on Kelly's Point, so I just don't know anything about that, what you're talking, but it has been mentioned in one of our meetings, I can't remember. Anything else? Okay, who wants ice cream? No.
Who has ice cream? Okay, I've got another question then.
Okay.
So we've all heard the rumors about Smuggler Kelly and his Chinese passengers. We always heard that in fact he had dropped them off the boat. What did you come across that would convince you that maybe that wasn't the case?
I would say it's just the logistics of it. He didn't have partners. He didn't have anyone that could help him. He'd have to be putting tying big chunks of cast iron to them so they'd sink. I mean, it just doesn't meet the test, in my opinion. And it seems as though he would have been caught at some time, and that we'd have a record of that. Well, this all started with a request from the Skagit Land Trust. They wanted some information on Kelly because of the purchase of Kelly's Point. And so that's why I'm here.
What's with the sword that's there? Is that something totally different?
Oh, yeah. One more thing, folks. Hello?
What is it?
This has absolutely nothing to do with Kelly, as far as we know. But it was found on the beach at Kelly's Point by Dan Rayner. And he presented it to the Historical Society, so.
Nice.
When did he find it?
I don't know,
Recently?
recent year, I don't, maybe I put it on there.
Wow, what a find.
He said it was around 2010.
Would it be unfair to just make a general announcement from the Historical Society that we are limited in numbers? If anybody here has any interest in any aspects of historical research or